Prophecies can be strange things. For some, they open up a universe into the unknown. For others, the ones who predict them, they can become both a blessing and a curse. What would it be like to have the knowing powers of the gods, to be able to stare into a harmless pool of water or mercury and be able to foresee the future? Hello, I am author and paranormal investigator Donald Allen Kirch, and this is Stranger Than Fiction.
Forget the world you know. Enter a bizarre dimension where the strange and unusual guide your imagination towards the unimaginable. Life is stranger than fiction in these true stories, where the ordinary is replaced with the extraordinary. Explore strange legends, weird myths, and odd folklore. The facts are laid before you to examine. You're invited to draw your own conclusions on these true stories of the paranormal.
Sitting alone at night in secret study. It is placed on the brass tripod. The slight flame comes out of the void and makes true that which should not be in vain.
With these few words, a French apothecary battling old age, gout, and the Inquisition started down a philosophical road of debate which continues to this day. Born Michel de Nostradamus on December 14th, or the 21st, historians are not clear on this fact, in the year 1503, a quite tall Frenchman of ancient Jewish origins and piercing dark eyes wrote a series of short poems, separating them into 10 sections, in which he entitled Centuries and stated rather proudly that he was writing predictions on both the near and distant future. He claimed to see into the midst of man's destiny and hoped, I'm sure, rather wholeheartedly, that he was helping mankind avoid its own dark fate. This was the legacy of a man history would later know simply by one name, Nostradamus.
Who wrote these words, claiming to see into the future? Dear God in heaven, this book is the work of the devil.
The Prophecies, which has been in print since 1565, published just 1 year before his death, has caused as many debates, frauds, and upheavals as the scholarly pursuits of the Holy Scriptures. There are those who state that the author was just an intelligent conman who saw opportunity, took it, and relished prosperously from the aftermath. There are those who thought him a devil, tempting man and igniting the fuels of revolution, war, and death. Others, from humble scholar to studied professor, believe him to be a prophet. However you choose to see Nostradamus, the man, he was and still is quite fascinating. Born in the small village of Saint-René-de-Provence in the south of France, Nostradamus was one of 9 children born to René de Saint-René and Jérôme de Nostradame, a well-known notary of the region. The family had been raised traditionally as Jews, but Jérôme's father, Guy Gaston, had converted to Catholicism around 1455, taking the Christian surname Nostradamus, commemorating the day he had been baptized. Little else is known of Nostradamus' childhood, but with one small exception. It is traditionally believed and accepted that the young boy had been educated and influenced by his great-grandfather, Jean de Saint-Rene. However, upon further investigation, the latter disappears from the history books on or around 1504. This being the truth, Nostradamus would have been barely 1 year old. So, if educated at only a year old, the young man who would grow to become a prophet must have been a remarkably intelligent individual.
Pardon, Professor, who is that young man over there?
My master, that is Michael de Nostradamus. His father is a well-respected notary, I am told.
Oh, yes, I remember the family. However, I am troubled by the boy. I do not like him.
Nostradamus attended the University of Avignon at the young age of 16, hoping to obtain his bachelor's degree in medicine. However, good fortune was not with him. Just a little over a year later, the university was closed due to a severe outbreak of the plague. Emotionally destroyed at the prospect of not finishing his studies, Nostradamus traveled throughout Europe on his own, studying various herbal remedies and properties. Little is known about this point in his life, except that it took him 8 years to finish his journeys. In 1529, things started to look up for the young Frenchman when he enrolled into the University of Montpellier, again hoping to obtain a doctorate in medicine. Old class standards soon caught up with Nostradamus when later in the school year it was discovered that during his 8-year odyssey he had labored as an apothecary, a manual trade, and was expelled without honors. A manual trade was expressly forbidden by university standards.
Monsieur de Nostradamus, having told untruths about thyself, and having betrayed fellow students of this body, we hereby excommunicate thee from all further studies in the medical arts. You are a laborer, sir. Your kind will not and cannot be tolerated.
Dear masters, please, I am a kind-hearted and God-fearing man. Let me learn the skills of a medical man. I see great tasks ahead for me.
Not in this lifetime. Now, go!
Scholars and historians still make the mistake of calling the seer a doctor. Although it was surely a lifelong dream of Nostradamus' to be a medical practitioner, he, legally, never became one. Failure did not set in well with this man. Nostradamus continued to work at his craft of being an apothecary and developed a rose pill, which became famous in its own right as protection against the plague. Note, the hips of the rose contain a substantial amount of vitamin C and have been known to help aid the body in defending against infections. Perhaps Nostradamus knew more than his fellow teachers did. It was during this time, when he was perfecting his rose pills, that he was invited to the countryside by Renaissance scholar Jules Caesar Scaliger in 1531. While in his studies, Nostradamus met and fell in love with a woman whose name has been lost in time. They would later marry and have 2 children. The children's name, like those of their mother, have been lost. In 1534, Nostradamus' home was attacked with a virulent form of the plague. So it was with a sense of irony that the man was away helping those he could with his rose pills when the very sickness he was battling took his family from him. Nostradamus fell into a deep depression, wandering throughout Europe.
Monsieur, this is no good. You must not turn your back on life. The children would want you to continue. In God's name.
No more talk of God. I am on a quest. I shall not return until I have learned the answers to the visions I have been cursed with all my life. I fare thee well, friend.
It was during this dark time the man learned to accept the visions he was starting to see. Nostradamus started his move from medical science to that of the occult. He later Latinized his name from Nostradam to Nostradamus, publishing an annual almanac starting in 1550, consisting of personal prophecies, astrological charts, biblical inserts, and general politics of the era. The almanac was a fantastic success. The Frenchman and his new wife, a rich widow, were greatly encouraged to continue with his literary endeavors. And so, each January 1st, instead of the traditional March, Nostradamus released a new yearly almanac. Each issue contained at least 11 calendars. The man started to develop a following.
Nostradamus, eh? I have heard he can foresee the future. Call him. I want to seek an audience with him now.
Yes, sire.
Soon, the rich and powerful were contacting him for personal horoscopes and psychic advice. Unlike most individuals in the same profession, Nostradamus never created personal birth charts or star readings. This was an exercise he expected his customers to do for him. If those seeing him did not arrive with the correct charts, he would refuse to do a reading. Even today, your average tabloid psychic would create your personal charts for you for a fee. This, Nostradamus was above doing. Under close investigations, he made numerous errors and never adjusted the figures or stars for each client's place or time of birth. They came in groves, paying and believing in his power. Between the local rich man's horoscope and the metaphysical warnings made to both king and queen, Nostradamus entertained the notion of writing a book of 1,000 French quatrains. This idea would later become the book he is so famous for. He had only one small obstacle to consider: the Inquisition. Using a technique known as virginalized syntax, Nostradamus used a complicated word game as he wrote his book. This word game consisted of a mixture of other languages, mathematics, astrology, and symbolism. For the time, this was a clever idea, considering others of his craft were being lined up and burned at the stake for being devil worshippers and heretics. Like all modern writers, Nostradamus had his critics and, unfortunately, editors. Wishing to publish his first edition in a three-part succession, the third and final installment found some damaging results. The publisher of the third installment refused to start in the middle of the 7th century, where Nostradamus had left off, and therefore at least 58 quatrains from the aforementioned century have been lost to history. As far as the world knows, there is no existing edition which contains these missing passages. Nostradamus was also a literary victim of his time, being perceived differently by those who purchased his books. To the rich and powerful, he was a religiously inspired prophet. To the poor and uneducated, he was considered a fake, insane, or a servant of evil. The same argument is often bantered about today by the educated and religious zealots. The more time passes, the more the arguments seem to remain the same. No matter how his fellows saw him, Nostradamus encouraged any and all respects. Even then, the man knew the value of sensationalism. One does not sell anything if they hide their brilliance under a bush. Nostradamus' star had started to rise in the finding of one major fan within the royal court of King Henry II of France, Catherine de Medici, the queen consort, read and believed in the seer's works. Having interpreted an offhand remark in his 1555 almanac of a threat upon the king himself, the queen ordered him before the royal court to not only explain his predictions, but to also have him write up a lifelong horoscope for all of her children. Nostradamus' wife and friends pleaded with the man not to go. All feared he would be beheaded for his proclamations. So, with fear in his heart, the man ventured to Paris. The opposite happened. Catherine made him counselor and physician in ordinary for her son and young King Charles IX. This was the only time in his life that the man held the honorable title of physician. He held the post until the time of his death. One of the persisting legends of Nostradamus was that he was hounded by the Inquisition. It was true that he had turned a curious eye toward his works every now and then, but he was harbored a most wanted criminal. During his time, magic and witchcraft were serious offenses, but neither prophecy nor astrology fell into this category. He would only have been in danger if he had practiced magic in concert with his works. Nostradamus always proclaimed that he was both a man of God and knowledge. In 1561, he did serve some time in prison, however brief. But this was only because he had released an early edition of his almanacs without the local permission of a bishop, having violated a royal decree. By 1566, the seer of France was a legend. Years of sacrifice, tragedy, and personal soul-searching had given Nostradamus all that he had worked for. The man had money, power, and respect. However, his battle with gout had turned into a rather painful struggle. Gout soon turned into dropsy, and he found it impossible to move or even leave his bed. Minus a few deaths, he was finally worth about 3,444 crowns, around 300,000 US dollars. Knowing that the end was near, he summoned his secretary one dark night to help him write out his will. He left a substantial amount to both his wife and children. Although his powers could be held up to some question, Nostradamus was indeed a caring and thoughtful father. So it was on July 1st, 1566, Nostradamus made his last and most important prediction. As his secretary, Jean de Chavannes, was leaving his room, the seer was heard to say,
"You will not find me alive at sunrise."
Master should not jest of such things.
Still, the telling is true. I wish thee well.
The next morning, Nostradamus was found dead, lying upon the floor next to his bed. Was he a quack, this man who claimed to see so much? Here's one small fact to consider. It has always been a standing legend that if a man were to drink from the skull of Nostradamus, that person would inherit his psychic powers. There is also a cryptic catch. After inheriting these powers, that brave soul would also die. During the French Revolution in 1791, 3 brave soldiers had decided to tempt fate. Entering a Franciscan chapel in Salon, they broke into the tomb of Nostradamus, opened his ancient coffin, and found a startling sight. There, around the neck of the seer's remain, was a golden plaque with the bold statement, May 1791. This at first startled the group of challengers. How could this be? It was, in fact, the middle of the month of May, and it was the year 1791. The plaque could only have been placed around Nostradamus' neck at the time of his death, in 1566. Nostradamus himself had predicted over 225 years after his death when his challenge would be faced. After a little more encouragement, wine, and bravado, the French soldier picked up the ancient seer's skull, filled it with wine, and drank. What mysteries he learned from this macabre experience were never known. Seconds after he had finished his drinking, a stray musket ball shot into the old church, killing the soldier on the spot. Fearing that a sacrilege had been committed and that they were all marked by the devil, the other soldiers' companions immediately ran out of the church. Thus was fulfilled the curse and prophecy of Nostradamus. After the revolution, Nostradamus' remains found a permanent home in the chapel of Saint Laurent, where his tomb remains to this very day. No one else has ever challenged the curse. The works of Michel de Nostradamus have been used and perverted throughout the ages. In modern times, during the years of the Second World War, the Reich Minister of Propaganda, Dr. Joseph Goebbels, used the prophecies of Nostradamus to break down the morale of the common French soldier at the Maginot Line, waiting for Germany to strike. The German Luftwaffe dropped leaflets of predictions of Hitler's success in France. In the United States, upon our entry into the Second World War, Hollywood got involved, and they put out a 12-chapter Saturday serial series called Nostradamus Says So. In a final letter written to his son, Nostradamus explained the power of prophecy. The seer claimed that all he had seen was only a shadow of the possible. If mankind could learn from his warnings, these ends could be avoided. It was only in his low faith within the savage nature of mankind did Nostradamus realize the futility of his actions. So, can mankind change the future? I certainly hope so. If you would like to see my work, go to my website at donaldallenkirch.com. That's Donald Allen, A-L-L-E-N, Kirch, K-I-R-C-H.com, one word, donaldallenkirch.com. My books are available in both ebook and print format and can be found on Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com. It would be an honor to entertain you. So, for Stranger Than Fiction, this is Donald Allen Kirch wishing you unpleasant dreams.
From the sky will come a great king of terror to bring back to life the great king of the Mongols before and after wars to reign by good luck.